The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. Restaurants are the heart of every community in BC, and almost 50% of them are struggling, says Ian Tostenson, the president of the Restaurant and Foodservices Association. Food, labor, and rent costs are rising, and customer traffic is down. It's a trend that has been gaining momentum since COVID, and the BCGEU strike to close down liquor stores pushed many operators to the brink. Tostenson says the strike was particularly difficult because it came at a time when provincial employment regulations were already forcing restaurant operators to cut back on employment. According to Douglas Magazine, the industry dropped 10,800 positions between September 2023 and the end of 2024. 70% of restaurants in the province have seen a drop in customers, and profitability is down by a mind-numbing 81% of restaurants, says Tostenson, who's calling on the government to reduce payroll taxes, encourage the federal government to do the same, return all or part of WorkSafeBC's $2.1 billion surplus to employers, and implement Save BC Restaurants menu issues. I invited Ian Tostenson of the BC Restaurant and Foodservices Association to join me for a conversation that matters about the state of the province's food services sector. Hi, Ian.
Hey, Stuart. How are you?
I'd like to say it's great to see you, but I'm concerned.
Yeah.
You are too, huh?
Yeah, I am. You know, and I think right now what concerns me is that we've got a province that is just, it doesn't have a plan. And I find that a lot of the things you just mentioned with respect to government is we're working against each other. And we're working at a time where we should be collectively working against other things, the uncertainty of tariffs, the commodity prices that we're faced with food costs going up. But we seem to be more, inclined to sort of familiar territory, so let's attack each other. We are in a major battle, as an example, with WorkSafe in British Columbia over a technical issue that they want to implement. And we've been talking to them for 2 years. And we've made it quite easy for them to say, look, just put this aside for a couple of years, leave us alone. It's not going to cost anybody any money. But, this would really help the industry a lot. And it's like, no, our policy is this, we have to do that. And so now we've got 15,000 restaurants, almost 200,000 people that are in absolute panic mode. And, we've tried everything, even to the Premier's office. And it's like, people just sort of go, well, no, it's just the way they have to do things. So there's a lot of opportunity here to fix this. But it's going to have to start with the government. It's going to have to start with the awareness how important this industry is, and not just in terms of culture and neighborhoods, but in terms of 200,000 people. And a large part of that, Stuart, are 15 to 24-year-olds. So you hear the federal government saying, we have to help youth unemployment. We do our part. In fact, we're one of the largest employers of youth in Canada. But again, the government doesn't quite that doesn't register with them.
Well, let's dig a little bit into what is this issue that is on the horizon that's causing such concern.
Yeah, so typically, and this has never happened, but restaurants are being asked to take, it's the old gratuity issue, take the gratuities that are earned in the restaurant and put them into payroll for the purposes of calculating the premiums. And so the restaurants said, well, we've never done that before. And WorkSafe said, well, you're going to have to do that because all forms of compensation have to be in the payroll. So then we simply said to them, let's make sure we do the calculation here. So Stuart's restaurant is going to add another 20% into his payroll. That's going to have huge cost implications. And their point is, well, restaurants that do take gratuities are going to pay more, and restaurants that don't are going to pay less, so it's going to balance off. And my response was, no one cares. No one asked for this except for your bureaucracy. But the big danger is not even that so much as it puts us offside with the CRA federally, because they have, and believe me, Stuart, the whole issue of gratuities and tips is very complicated. And the CRA say, as long as the employees control the tips and distribute the tips amongst themselves, then we're not going to consider that to be employment income, and they're responsible for their own tax. But if we do it the way WorkSafe does it, it puts all that at peril, and it takes away one of the advantages of the industry. But it just doesn't make sense to me that, for 2 years, I've been actually the one guy, which was the negotiating team for all of industry. We took all of industry, including Uber, Skip the Dishes, the hairdresser guys, everybody that took gratuities, and wrote a letter and said, please, can you just leave small business alone? And the answer is no, we can't. And that's a great example of how we can do much better.
Well, are they then saying to the restaurant, well, you now have to take that tip revenue
Yep.
into your books,
Yep.
which you now have to claim as revenue, which you weren't before,
That's right.
which then increases your own tax burden.
Yep.
So as a restaurateur, you're not keeping the tip, but you're paying a tax on those
Right.
tips.
That's right.
Because it's now calculated as part of your overall revenue.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And so somebody came up with a rule like that who has no idea what it's like to run a small business.
Yeah, I know. And I've said to them, I think we should just get a few of you out of your offices in Richmond working in a restaurant for a couple of days. But it doesn't stop there with them. They have. I'll tell you a funny story. A friend of mine's a doctor in Surrey, and they came in and said to the emergency ward doctors, "You need to have a safety committee, a first aid committee." And they went, "Why?" Well, it's part of our regulation. And the doctors went, "It's a true story." They went, "Do you know who you're talking to? We have some of the best doctors in all of Canada here." And the guy goes, "I don't really care. You need to have a first aid committee, and it need to be set up." And he was insistent on that. And they just shake their heads because there is no interpretation ability for people that work in those kinds of jobs. And I understand that. But I'm trying to change this. And I've said to the Premier, we've got to change this. We can't be fighting each other for the sake of costing small business uncertainty, red tape, extra money. And it's not just us, it's all sorts of small business within British Columbia. I think is a great opportunity, but it's unlocking that with the politicians that don't understand these nuances that really have an impact.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. Well, there's one other element that affects the bottom line for a small business too. Okay, you now have to create an accounting function that you didn't before.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to be paying for that as well. Like the costs continue to mount. And if we're in an environment like this where, in the introduction I said, 50% of restaurants in British Columbia are on the brink. It's these small things that can push them over the edge.
Yeah.
Then what do we wind up with? Like the consequences are severe.
Well, and they are because, it's really unfortunate to hear, there's recently a story out about 4,000 restaurants could go broke in Canada this year.
Yes.
That represents about 500 or 600 businesses in British Columbia. Each one of those businesses is an entrepreneur that put their life savings at heart. There's stories in the news that, along the Broadway corridor, which is being hammered now by the transportation upset there, taking out mortgages in their house or selling their house to keep their businesses alive. I mean, there's no reason for us to do this because it's such an important part in terms of culture, in terms of our neighborhoods, in terms of youth employment. It's a very substantial, in terms of tourism. I mean, we've got FIFA coming, and we are going to use, said the Premier, we're going to use the hospitality industry to cheerlead this economy, to showcase British Columbia, all the great stuff that we do in terms of food and beverages and stuff. I said, someone has to stand up and cheerlead. I said, you can't because you've got so many issues. But we can, but you got to help us be strong. Mm-hmm.
And the response?
Yeah, sounds good to us. And then where does it go?
Well, and that seems to be the challenge, doesn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
One of the other elements is getting access to talent. I mean, we talked about providing opportunities for young people, but there's not enough young people to fill the work gap.
No.
Or the labor gap. So we need immigration policy that's going to be reflective of that. And right now, we're in a kind of a state of limbo.
So for every 3 people that retire in BC, we replace 2. So we're a third short. The provincial government has a labor forecast over the next 10 years, which calls for just over 1 million workers. 30% of that, according to them, has to come from immigration. Now you have the federal government, which controls immigration. They've severely cut it. So we estimated the 15,000 restaurants that we have in BC that everybody's short at least one cook or chef That's 15,000 people, and it's a crisis. And of course, and over the years, the last 4 or 5 years, we brought in 3,000 or 4,000 trained, skilled cooks and chefs for our restaurants, and that stabilized it. But that's over now. So now we don't know where to turn because immigration has been cut. The province has a program called the Provincial Nominee Program. They allocate certain positions for certain professions, but we're not on that list. And so
you're not on the list at all.
Not on the list at all. No, it's all doctors and engineers. But what you're going to see now is that more restaurants will close because you've got owners now that aren't making any money. They're making maybe 2 or 3% return. They're working in their own kitchens to try to keep it open, and there's nowhere for them to go. But again, you can't get, and we're the first ones that say responsible immigration is imperative. It has to be responsible, has to change. I totally get that. The public don't, though, because they see immigration as refugees coming into the country and taking services and stuff. Well, we see it as skilled workers. I'll tell you a story. We had an offer to a gentleman who was working on a cruise ship, and it was like, your job will be, it could have been Earl's, can't remember, 37 and a half hours a week at these wages, which is what Canadians get paid. And they wrote back and said, but I'm looking for a full-time job. And they said, well, this is a full-time job. It's 37 and a half hours. And the guy goes, look, I work on a cruise ship. I work 7 days a week, 10 hours a day. You are not offering me a full-time job. And that's where Canada needs to get our stuff together here better. We need to be way more productive. When it comes to the front of the restaurants, unfortunately, we're seeing a real problem with youth. And they've come with a lot of conditions. If you talk to the owner of Sea Lovers Fish and Chips, he'll tell you point blank, they'll come in and they'll say, yeah, I want a job, but I can't work Wednesdays, I have a hockey practice, or I can't work Fridays, I don't have community. He said, I don't understand this. But it used to be kids would want to come in and work so hard to get a job, to get the experience, but we've lost that as well too. So we need some discipline. We need some, and I think our industry can do this. We're a great industry for people to get orientated into business, but a lot of things are going to have to change.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. You've put out a menu, say BC Restaurants, which is quite clever because you open it up and you've got menu items, unhappy hour,
yeah,
unappetizers. It's like it's a good way to present it. Food costs, like how do you stay ahead of that?
Well, here's the great divide. Your big restaurant groups are buying ahead. They'll buy 6 months ahead. Sea Lovers Fish and Chips, they'd tell you that I buy, 8 months ahead in terms of my seafood, in terms of fish I need, so I get good prices.
Yeah.
But the independent restaurant's not going to get that. And so it's really hard to maintain that. And that's why the casualties we're seeing in our industry are mainly the independents. So the commodity prices going up, and a lot of it, is coming out of the United States. So there's a shortage of beef, or there is a drought, and all these things. And with the uncertainty of tariffs right now, that hasn't helped the situation at all. Unfortunately, that's just something we're going to have to do. But I say to government, the one way we can reduce costs is your costs that you're imposing on us to help us offset this. But there's going to come a time that the operator's going to say, you know what, the only way I can make it is a $30 hamburger. And then the public's not going to buy that. They're going to go, no, that's not going to happen. That's already happening right now with the economy and with people concerned about their own uncertainties and economic uncertainties. They're pulling back. They're not necessarily not going out less frequently, but they're spending differently. They're going to go to happy hours, or maybe you and I are going to share a piece of pizza and a half a glass of wine. But we're still going to have that social need because we learned that from the pandemic, but we're spending less, and that's another issue, and that's economic confidence that right now we're lacking in British Columbia. In fact, it's not too much. It's not too much different in the United States either.
So I'm giving you permission now. You're in charge of being able to completely rewrite the laws, the rules. Where do you start? Because as you're explaining this, I'm going, okay, this is complicated.
Yeah.
They're not directly interconnected, but they're not separate. You do this and it offsets that. Where do we start in our ability to be able to turn this narrative around?
If I was the premier, I would bring in every minister in and say, your responsibility now is to listen to industry. Don't impose things on industry because you think it's the right thing to do, but listen to them. I said to the premier, I said, let's put together 10 of the brightest people in this industry, and we'll give you all the recommendations we need. We understand the financial problems that you're in. We understand that there has to be a social responsibility with serving liquor. We understand that, but you have to listen to us because we have the solutions. They don't do that. They think that they have the solutions and they impose the solutions. So that would be the first thing I would do.
Yeah.
And then I would make sure that government agencies like WorkSafe are there to serve, not to impose. I'd make sure that licensing in the province is there to speed things up. You shouldn't take 4 months to get a patio approval. You've got FIFA coming, Stuart wants a restaurant, and you got to wait for 4 months until you find out whether you get your patio approved?
Yeah, 4 months to a maybe.
To a maybe.
Not a yes or a no, maybe.
So the third thing I would do is adopt what I feel very strongly about is almost like a nexus past attitude. Is that if Stuart's an established business person, he's paid his taxes, he's had very few incidents, if any, with employment standards, something, give him the benefit of the doubt. If he says, I need a patio, give him the patio and you catch up with the paperwork later because you know he's good for it. And tell Stuart that if you don't do it the right way, we'll close your business. Guess what? Stuart's going to do it the right way.
Right.
But you got to unlock the freedom and the creativity and the enterprise nature of our industry in particular, because there's all these entrepreneurs, but they're being held back because of government regulation.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. How do we attract more people into the sector as a career? Because I look at some people who go, okay, well, it's only a temporary job, or it's a stepping stone. And yet, if you take a look at people who have done well, they have had fabulous careers, and it can be a path to entrepreneurialism, even despite the issues that we just talked about. But there needs to be, we need to make it more attractive.
And that's our rule, but unfortunately it's how do you fit this into the schedule? But we need to remind people that some of the greatest entrepreneurs will tell you they started at McDonald's, or they worked for the Keg, or they worked for George Tidball back when the Keg started, and they learned all these principles about customer service, or they saw George Tidball standing in front of his own kegs in a lineup because he wouldn't go bypass the lineup just because he was the owner. He did it because that was the respect for our guests. We need to market that better. And even if we market it and say, look, this is maybe a temporary pass-through, but you're going to learn marketing. You're going to learn to talk to the community, to be able to communicate. You're going to learn scheduling. You're going to learn pressure. You're going to learn about sociability. And the problem, we can deal with that. The problem we have, though, is getting people interested in working in kitchens. And that's where, we have only about 800 people that graduate from cooking schools in BC. So there's no demand, unfortunately. And I don't think people see it as sexy. I think they see it as a lot of awful hard work. And where does it get to? It's a tough one to answer because generally it could get you to ownership. But then when you talk about ownership right now and restaurants aren't making a great return, people kind of shun that right now. And, we still have to shake that reputation of uncertainty that happened as a result of the pandemic, where we weren't the most dependable employer because we were closed, I think it was 112 days out of 2 years. But for a lot of people trying to pay their rent, and that it was really, really tough on them. So we've got a lot of things. I mean, I hate to use the pandemic, but the pandemic we've never really recovered from that. And I think a lot of businesses haven't. We got hit with higher prices, we got hit with higher interest rates, consumer confidence, and it just went on and on. And I come back to the things that we can control. We can't control commodity prices, the price of beef, but we can certainly control the attitude of our governments working with business, not just restaurants, but all business, to encourage them to get on with it. I think we could be fantastic. So
Well, then also let's layer in other programs. The government comes along quite nicely and says to everybody in British Columbia, you don't have to pay your medical services premium any longer. I know food service operators who were already paying their staff's monthly fee, and then the government came along to them and said, well, no, you now have to pay us. The appeal to government was, yeah, but I can't turn around and take that $30 to $50 away from the employee. They'll revolt.
yeah.
Well, that's your problem.
Cost keeps, yeah, exactly.
So now they were paying for it twice.
Yeah.
But it fell on deaf ears. These are the kinds of policies that make a big difference.
Well, we've got a restaurant group, very well-known pizza place in Canada, and there's 5 separate businesses that are owned by the same person, but they're all registered separately. The government came in and said, you know what, actually you're one big business. And so your exemption from the employer's health tax isn't valid. So we're going to take all these restaurants, and there's going to be one now payroll number. Oh, you owe us $500,000.
Yeah.
And I talked to the owner. He said, I don't have $500,000. And I've always done it this way. And my accountant said we were doing it the right way, but the auditor came in. So now it's just an uphill battle.
Well, and then their total profitability tipped over that $600,000 mark, and their base tax rate skyrocketed.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So a lot of opportunity, and I'm passionate about this. One of the things that is going right is the mayor, working with Ken Sim in Vancouver. He gets this.
Yeah.
The problem is the bureaucracy isn't necessarily buying it. They're very difficult to navigate. And I don't blame them, but we've got to get that changed, because Ken gets it. He wants to grow a business. He wants to grow hospitality. He's trying to do what he can for restaurants, because he recognizes they're a window for opportunity for tourism. When was the last time you went traveling? You probably remember the restaurant you're in, not necessarily the Alcatraz that you went to. It's like the restaurant.
Oh,
so
they become great memories.
Great memories.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's there. We're on the cusp of this. I think maybe the good news is the province is in such terrible shape. I think they're becoming now eager for business to step up. And business isn't bad. Business is good, and business can help.
Yeah.
But the doors have to open for us to help.
That's unfortunate framing, Ian. But I think you're right. We are in very rough shape here.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming in and sharing with us the state of the sector. And I'm sorry to hear that it's that way, because we're talking about so many people's livelihoods.
We are, and I like I said, I'm the optimist, and I feel we can fix this.
Yeah.
But it's going to take a lot of effort to get government to start thinking differently and much more like an entrepreneur.
Thank you.